Welcome to the Bucher and Friends podcast. Here is your host.
Let's send it over to Rick Bucher.
Rick Bucher.
Welcome to another episode of Bucher and Friends, part of the United WeCast Network. I'm Rick Bucher. You can read my stuff on Bleacher Report. You can follow me on Twitter at Rick Bucher. And you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Bucher Friends. If you enjoy the show, or even if you don't, we would love to get a rating from you. All you have to do is punch the stars, and that's on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want something from us, screenshot the review and tweet it to us at Bucher Friends, and you'll be entered for a chance to win some swag from Ryan Hollins, Will Blackman, or myself. This is actually an episode of Bucher, Friendless, as we like to call it, when I go solo. Normally Wednesdays are a day where I have a guest, but there are a number of things going on in the sports world in general and the NBA in particular that I wanted to hit upon, and I needed a little room to move. So I hope you will indulge me. I had a friend ask me today, speaking of the sports world in general, about the college admission scandal and what is my take on it. And my general feeling is that this is a brazen act. What we've seen is simply what has gone on for a while on steroids. It seems like with everything that people are just becoming more brazen about breaking the rules or thinking that they can do what they want. And then the repercussions come. But it's really just an amplification of what we've been seeing happen or what has been happening. People just take it to the next level. And it got me to thinking about my own experience getting into Dartmouth College. I'm the first and only person in my immediate family to go to college. And to be honest, going to Dartmouth never even occurred to me before my junior year of high school. I figured I would go wherever I could get the best soccer scholarship, because I couldn't imagine my parents being able to afford a college tuition. I didn't have aspirations to go to an Ivy League school or MIT or Stanford. My dad was in construction. My mom was a seamstress working in alterations in a Federated department store in Cincinnati. And as luck would have it, though, my mom was asked to do some alterations for the wife of the chairman of Federated department stores. They happened to be based in Cincinnati. And when I came along and my mom couldn't work at the department store anymore and had to go out on her own, she started working for the wife of the chairman exclusively. And that meant that I was going up to their mansion as a kid when my mom went up there to work. Now, I don't know exactly how or why this came about, but when I started getting ready to think about where I might go to college, the wife and the chairman, decided that I should go to Dartmouth, the same as their sons had, who were a little older, the generation before me. And this chairman also happened to be a Dartmouth trustee and friends with the Dartmouth director of admissions. Now, long story short, they flew me up to Hanover, New Hampshire on a company jet the winter of my junior year and had me interviewed by the director of admissions directly because he was retiring at the end of that school year and they wanted his recommendation in my file. Now, at the time, my grades weren't good enough to get into an Ivy League school. Truth be, I was never that motivated to get straight A's. It was, what did I have to get to keep my parents off my back? And I thought it was kind of dorky to fixate on grades that much, to be a straight A student. It just didn't. I liked being an athlete. I thought I was smart, but I did what I had to do. And getting A's just wasn't that. As long as I got A's and B's, my parents didn't give me a hard time. And that's all I wanted. But once I visited Dartmouth, I fell in love with the place. So when the director, and he told me directly, he goes, your grades aren't good enough to get in here. And I basically said, okay, so what do I need? What do I have to get? And I think he was something like an A-, 3.8, something like that. That was the bottom line. And so now that I was motivated, I had a reason. That's what I got. for the remainder of my junior year and the start of my senior year. Now, as I mentioned, or I've mentioned previous podcasts, we've talked about it. I was a pretty good soccer player. But even when I look back at that, I see where there was some sketchiness. And all of this comes up because I'm in the midst right now. My kids are both basketball players. They're both playing AAU and high school. And I'm blown away by the politics and by the machinations to get parents to spend money. And I've always been of the mind that, look, however good you are, people will find you. And I still believe that. But it is very intoxicating. It's very captivating. It's very alluring to think that, hey, my kid needs to play on this particular team. They need to fly around the country. They need to do all these things if they're going to make it to the next level. I don't believe that at my core, but it's easy to get swayed by that. Anyway, so I was a pretty good soccer player, and I was all-state. This is in Ohio, my junior and senior years. So I was one of 33 players. For whatever reason, they picked 33 players. Those were the all-state, and I don't think they even had a first, second, third. They just picked 33. So I was that. But I was also named an All-American by some outfit called Who's Who Among American High School Athletes. That doesn't exist anymore, and in order to do this podcast, I did a little research. I think it went away in about 2007. But looking back on it, even before I did this research, I realized that it was an operation that was just looking to make money by selling you a book with you and your accomplishments listed in it. And the allure of being able to say, I'm an All-American, and see, here's the book that proves it, was, who wants to get into the details? Now, for soccer, I always looked at the Parade All-Americans. It would come out in the Sunday Parade magazine, and for high school players, I was never that. I always thought that was the true All-American selection. But this was the next best thing, or at least that's the way I looked at it. So why am I telling you all this? Well, because I can say firsthand that the system and how people get to the next level or get on teams or wherever it might be, there's been manipulation there for decades. If my mom hadn't worked for the wife of the chairman of Federated and her husband wasn't a Dartmouth trustee, would I have got into Dartmouth? Probably not. Would I have had the career I've had without a Dartmouth degree? I can't quite answer that. I can say that the Dartmouth degree alone didn't make me successful. I don't believe that. And I do believe whether it's playing a sport or landing a job, it still comes down to what you can do. I know that's hard to believe. And certainly the parents that were involved in the admission scandal don't believe it. Even though I look at, as actors, and many of them are in the entertainment business. It really comes down to, yes, you have to know people, you have to have relationships, but ultimately you have to be able to get the job done. The relationships give you the opportunity. And maybe that's what they saw, was that if I can just get my kid into the best schools, they're going to meet the right people, and that's going to give them the leg up. And all of this is subjective anyway, right? I mean, I can really understand how easy it would be for a parent to convince themselves that what they're doing is in the best interest of their kids, and this is kind of the way it's done anyway, which is true. There's a lot of truth in that. They just took it to an absolute extreme. There's one thing for me to be named an All-American when maybe I wasn't, or believe that I was an All-American when maybe it was somebody's money-making operation that gave me that title. But that's not what allowed me to play at Dartmouth. A degree can open a door or provide an interview, just as playing on a travel team that puts you on the floor in front of college scouts can give you an opportunity. But it still comes down to, can you play? So if you could play or write or report, the scouts and the teams and the employers will find you. I've firmly believe that. That's been my experience. Now, I made varsity as a freshman at Dartmouth, even though I was a walk-on, and they'd never heard of me. I don't think that my being in that All-American book had anything to do with me doing that. I didn't play enough to letter my first year, but here's my point. We can all get outraged at the celebrities and their kids who got into schools they didn't deserve to attend, but in the end, they're not the ones who got over. It's the people who took their money. Same as the people with the who sold me the book. They got the money. I guess I got something that made me feel good. It was worth the money, I would say. Even though I look at it now and it's not, I don't look at it as an accomplishment. I see it for what it was. But they got paid for a pure vanity play. Just like the sellers of the who's who among American high school athletes got over on my family. So did that book do anything for me? Nah, I'd say not more than the essay I wrote to land my Sports Illustrated internship. I was inspired, and that did the trick. Certainly not more than the hours I spent dribbling cones in my driveway as a soccer player. I still believe that if you do the work, opportunities will come, and you will be ready for them. Now, speaking of opportunities and taking advantage of them, we have two great examples of that just this past week in the NBA. Dirk Nowitzki passing Wilt Chamberlain on the all-time scoring list, and Isaiah Thomas getting a hero's welcome in his return to Boston with the Denver Nuggets. Now, both are feel-good stories, and both deserve the love and adulation that has been poured upon them. And I understand that in today's countless streams of content and information, there's an instinctive reflex to inflate the meaning of everything. And you knew a but was coming. You knew a big but was coming. But let's appreciate the achievement without making it something it's not. For example, passing Wilt in scoring in no way means that Dirk was a better player. I don't know if anybody's trying to pose that, but certainly the way it's being played out, like Dirk's in that circle. No, he's not. Doesn't vault him into the conversation of all-time best forwards, certainly not all-time best players, not in the NBA. Someone on Twitter even asked the question, Dirk or Larry Bird, which is a question that has no business being asked. There is no comparison. Maybe as shooters, but that's about it. All-around players, it's not close. Larry Bird checks every box. Now, I saw Dirk come into the league. I saw him so scared initially that Don Nelson looked to trade him that very first year. I saw him bamboozled by Steven Jackson in the Warriors' We Believe upset of league MVP Dirk and the number one seeded Dallas Mavericks. I saw him get the yips in the first half of the closeout game against the Miami Heat in the finals. Now, he persevered through all that. And considering where he came from as a second division German team, our team in Germany, it is impressive what he's done. He persevered through all of that. I mean, think about it. You're the league MVP and you get knocked out in the first round. That's humbling. And I know it took him a great deal to come back from that. That he persevered through all those things to have the career that he did, to win a ring, to become an elder statesman, to be celebrated the way he is by the Dallas Mavericks. All of it deserved. But I saw the beginnings. I went back to Germany with him. I watched him work out in the elementary school gym where he got his start with his career-long mentor, Holger Geschwindner. Look, there aren't many finer dudes that I've met inside or outside the NBA. He's a good dude. But that doesn't mean we move the marker on where he belongs in the pantheon of great players. And I can't help but feel as if that happens more today than ever with the media. because this might sound like the old grumpy guy. I'm just not convinced that the media that covers the game today watches the game or understands the human element of the game. Far too much of it, or they don't trust what they see. They go to the numbers, they go to the analytics, they go to the statistics. I've often said this, or I've thought about this of late. Like 15, 20 years from now, LeBron James is going to be, I believe, appreciated and heralded in a far greater way than he is now. Why? Because we've all seen him play. When we get a little ways away and it becomes just measuring the numbers, what he's done is going to be looked at in a far more extraordinary fashion. But that doesn't make what we've seen and what we believe having seen it in how the sausage was made, that doesn't discount the value of that. Quite the opposite, I believe. Seeing is believing. And I saw Dirk from the beginning to the end. And I've seen him grow. But to put him in the same sentence as Larry Bird is absurd. He's on the first team of players born and developed overseas. He's there along with Yao Ming and Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker and Pau Gasol. But it's okay to stop there. We don't need to inflate this. It's like I see so much stuff on social media about so-and-so is a problem or so-and-so caught a body. And then I'll check, and that highlight is from a game in which that player lost. Or I see that and I see it referenced to 6 different guys a week. It begins to dull the significance. And we keep reaching higher and higher and trying to expand or add superlatives to things, to gain attention or try to make them catch somebody's attention. I'm not sure exactly what drives it, but it's hurting all of us, I believe. You don't know what to trust. There's too many times where you go, nah, it ain't all that. I don't want that feeling with Dirk. I don't want to have that, And that's what happens, whether it's LeBron or Dirk or anybody. When we amplify what they've done beyond what it really deserves, then it forces someone like me to say, hold on. And now you run the risk of being critical of someone who's accomplished something great. And you don't get to celebrate what they did. You got to work to put it in its proper context because somebody's trying to make it more than it deserves to be. And it's not about putting that player down or even that person who's suggesting that down. It's not about that. It's about being fair across the board. Because those who were here before Dirk, it's an insult to Larry Bird to make that comparison. It's not fair to him to ask that question. It discounts what he did. So that's the danger. And that's why, if I'm a critic at times, if I'm a grumpy guy, that's why. It's not because I'm trying to take somebody down a peg. I just want to make sure all the pegs are in their proper place. Same goes in a way for Isaiah Thomas and his 2+ seasons in Boston. Although you would have thought that he'd spent half his career there. But I will say, packed an awful lot into that 2+. Playing through his sister's death, and what we later learned was a torn hip flexor, all to help the Celtics get to the conference finals. It's noble, it's heartrending. It deserves the appreciation of Celtics fans. I understand why they had the emotions that they did and showered it upon them the way they did the other night. But again, we can stop there. Did he deserve to be re-signed to a max or near max contract by Danny Ainge for that? No. Did they do him wrong by trading him to Cleveland for Kyrie Irving? Hell no. That he would have won a championship in Boston if they would have kept him, as Isaiah suggested? don't be absurd. Again, don't be absurd. He's on his 6th team. Boston was his 3rd. It's not like they were the first ones to move him. And it's an unfortunate, but he's been a shadow of himself since the hip injury. And that's to be expected when a 5'9" guy and whose ability to change direction or stop on a dime is key to his game. Danny Ainge knew that. He understood that. I mean, that's the rough part of the business. Isaiah Thomas is an amazing story. And as an undersized guy, I fully understand why he has to be equal parts belligerent and arrogant to be successful. No one is going to give a 5'9", late 2nd round pick the benefit of the doubt on anything. I get it. But that doesn't mean that we should or that we have to co-sign whatever he tells himself to believe he can be a giant killer. And I will say, it would be easier for me to root for him if he let his overachievements speak for themselves and didn't tell us how he's capable of so much more if only Danny had re-signed him or people understood or he got the ball more, whatever it might be. At least not now. Not now. When he's averaging 15 minutes a game and 7 points and shooting below 30% from 3-point range. I hope he gets to continue his career. I hope that he finds a way to get healthier, maybe a little quicker. I mean, from what I've seen with the Nuggets right now, he's floating. He's doing it on guile. And God bless him that he's doing it. But does he deserve a big payday? No, there's no charity in the NBA. There are no charitable acts. They might have nonprofits that they support outside of it, but when it comes to inside the league, no. Nobody is operating on that frequency. So, all right. By the way, in case you didn't know, it's tournament time, and we have an NCAA bracket challenge for Bucher and Friends listeners. It's free to enter. There are cash prizes. It's $60 to the winner, $30 for second place, and $10 for third. I know it's not a whole lot of change, but it's really, look, it's not the bragging, or it is the bragging rights. It's not the money, it's the bragging rights, right? That's the biggest dividend. And we may even invite the winner onto the podcast to gloat. That's to be determined. Depends on who it is. If it's Ryan Hollins, no, we're going to cut that out. Speaking of Hollins, he in the next podcast, he's going to join me and we'll get his favorite NCAA tourney memories. We'll find out who he favors to win it all this year and all of that. And find out what this beef is between him and Will Blackman. All right. So, as I mentioned at the start, if you enjoy the show, or even if you don't, please drop us a rating, review us on iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Screenshot the review and tweet it to us at Bucher Friends, and you'll be eligible to win prizes. In our next podcast, I will no longer be friendless. It'll be me, it'll be Ryan Hollins, and we will be talking NCAA tourney, among other things. In the meantime, as always, thanks for listening.